Hello. Hello. I've just obviously done a couple of hours of talking, briefly talking about the like pagan or ideas or foundations of the ancient world. Talk about briefly about the church and how the church was a mixture of pagan ideas and Bible elements, which is called syncretism. I also mentioned Nicolaitism, which I'll talk about later. But the idea that the religions of the earth relating to the ancient religions and empires that were about the worship of the heavens, the worship of the earth, and that's what they call paganism. I'm sure people knew that. So the great different pantheistic gods, all these different ideas, and which we've related to the early scriptures about running parallel, which is what I'm trying to do, is run things parallel, what the Bible has said, running parallel to history, and all the things that confirm that, the idea of fallen angels, their offspring, the idea, of a hierarchy, the idea of what we talk about by deist. What do we mean by deist? Which is where we get the word democracy. It's all to do with man doing his own thing. We have theocracy. Theocratic is to do with kingdom. We have a constitutional monarchy. That's all. It's not. The Queen supposedly isn't seen to rule. She probably is more powerful, does rule, and I know she does, than what we're shown. Saudi Arabia obviously is a true theocracy, and so is Jordan. And what they say has to be done. The Kingdom of God is a theocracy. It's not a democracy. But as I say, the ideas of deist, theist, and then you get atheist. It's all interrelated, those words. But the thing is that I touched on briefly about the ideas of the Nordics, which relates to the Nephilim, which means the fallen, which goes back to the Book of Enoch, and the Genesis accounts. This was the Book of Enoch, that the Christian community did in the early ancient world, treasure. But it wasn't included in the canon. Maybe there are reasons why it wasn't included in the canon. But the Ethiopian church has the Book of Enoch as part of their Bible canon. So anyway, that the idea that we are, people say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, and I've had Christians say, oh, that's just conspiracy theory. But in a sense, Jesus was a conspiracy theorist. And if you have faith, like he had faith, and you could see from his point of view, then it's no longer theory, it's fact. And Paul talks about being on our guard against the devil, or the wiles of the devil, who is like a lion, a roaring lion. He says he roams about looking for somebody to devour. And he has his minions, his little agents who are either, co-working, because he's not omnipotent, he can't be everywhere at the same time, so he's got all these different other angels and also hierarchals that do his bidding, and then then the scriptures say that the Nephilim, when they were judged, some were allowed to roam the earth, and they were the ones that Jesus talks about when he says about the spirits that come to try and possess a house. And how they roam around, and once you clean them, the person has to change, or else the person's life will become 7 times worse than it was before, because the spirit comes back with 7 more demons worse than itself if the person doesn't change, doesn't clean house. Remember I was saying about cleaning house. So we've all got a clean house. We've got to look deep within. We've got to change. Change is the word. Because if we don't change, we'll just be like the the people that laughed at Noah. And he preached for over nearly 200 years. He preached, and only his family him and his family were saved. So it's about, so we can either choose to be one like the people that were just suddenly deluged, and that's it, or we can be part of the group we still has a chance to escape. I'm not talking about the rapture. I think the rapture is it's a false flag. It's another. It's a strategy of the fallen angels via the earthly rulers, minions. And obviously we've seen through history the rulers of this age, the rulers throughout history have used physical bodies to inhabit, to do, who were either a part of the same bloodlines, and to rule the earth. And Paul talks about the authorities in Ephesians 6, doesn't he? Read Ephesians 6, so he's not going on about a conspiracy theory. And Jesus, when he says, he knows about what's going on in people's hearts, and he knew about what spirit. One minute he's talking to Peter when he acknowledges him as the Son, because God has revealed to him about who he is. He's the Messiah, the Messiah, God's anointed. And then the next moment he lunges out and says, when Jesus says about he's going to have to go to the cross or whatever, and he says, no, we can't. I'm not going to allow you to do that. And Jesus rebukes him, because it seems like some other force has taken control of him at that moment. So clearly, Jesus is seeing everything more enhanced, three-dimensionally, spiritually, in this three-dimensional spiritual thing. A bit like one of them superheroes, you see, with their extra powers of perception. And it's clearly not theory. So I've had conversations with Christians who are close friends. I've nearly ended up breaking up friendships because I just can't take their bubble-like mentality. The fact that they just won't. All this stuff I've said, it's all biblical. It's all roots. It's all related to, and I've tried to, all related to their faith. Yet they're just closed off, and what I've learnt, as I say, that there is an overlap of the truth. The people of the earth waking up, and some of them might be New Age type people. So I don't really care, but they're finding truth, because there is an element. There are an overlap of truth and scripture. Even people who may not know the scripture, because truth is truth. It doesn't matter how you wrap it up. In my view, that's why I think David Icke's book was unraveling a lot of stuff, and I felt, well, this is almost like what I've read certain stuff in the Bible, and I'm not going to go into deep about that. People could say, we shouldn't be reading David Icke because he's a New Age guru, but somebody might say that about him. Anyway, but he was bringing out again a lot of stuff about the secret societies, and the Illuminati, whose religion is about the Luciferian, the idea of Lucifer's light I mentioned about earlier. The idea that Lucifer gave the knowledge to whom he wills, to those who would bow down to him, and he even says in the scripture, he approached Jesus and Yeshua and offered him the kingdoms of the world. See, although in one sense God has the whole world in his hands, at some point this realm is ruled by the prince of this world. Prince of the power of the air, the prince of the power of the Matrix, like the Matrix film. So, the idea of systems, the idea of the beast, that we can jump into the idea of the beast in the book of Revelations, and the idea of the world system, and systems generally are about control. They're about systematic, methodological. They're like ritualistic. they're like things that you do that happen over and over again. So people who criticise people will say, oh, they're religious, But anybody who has a routine and sticks to it vehemently is religious, because that's what it means. It means system. So I just wanted to just cover that. Say system is, the whole idea of system is workability, reliability, or we're doing something because we do it, because we've always done it, or which may be related to tradition, which we could say that is, maybe that's part of human nature, to have a system, stick to it, because in some sense it does reward in some levels, and maybe produces some kind of result, some kind of satisfaction. I'm not saying we shouldn't have order, but as I say, the whole structure of building a building and building the pyramid will be based on the structures of system, of laws, maths, science, knowledge. And some people might argue that a lot of that knowledge came because of Lucifer, because of the fall, that we would never have had the systems, the knowledge to have a society if it wasn't for the fall. and I understand our point of view. Maybe I can see what they're saying. But again, I believe it's not what, God's not against knowledge. He's not against people creating and doing, doing maths and doing all these things. It's not at all, because he himself is a creator. And we have many of us have a creative spark. Some of us are the creators, some of us are the workers, some of us are the artists, some of us are the healers, some of us are the thinkers, some of us are the leaders, some of us are whatever, in a way. But digressing, the ideas of system, we've had, and mathematical precision. So the people that built the pyramids, that built the empires, were built around the knowledge of maths, geometry, which is what a lot of the secret societies, supposedly the lower ranks, or a big chunk of it, is to do with the ideas of the building blocks of how to create, how to build, make. A lot of Freemasonry is behind architecture, because it's to do with the Masonic traditions and the crafts that are actually kept secret, or maybe because, they probably are just very, very complex. Like, it sometimes takes you 7 years to become an architect, and it doesn't mean you have to become a Freemason, obviously, if you're an architect, but there is the overlap, because I think the idea of the building of empire, the building of cities, structures, civilizations, humanly speaking, has been done, and those traditions, those ideas of creating civilizations and structures and cities, it's been, the world orders from the past up to now have been based on a similar passage of time, of things being passed on through lineages and societies and say the building trade and all these things. And obviously there's the other departments of society, and knowledge, science, spirituality, and all these other dimensions, and then the alternative branches of thought that came up, like the Enlightenment, that branched humanity into a different area, and obviously through all the wars and bad things that have happened to us all, that's changed, or gotten rid of large chunks of humanity, and then it's laid the foundation for a new world to be built. And obviously the First World War, Second World War has shown that, and other wars to a lesser degree. But I think we're in that. I read somewhere that we're in a time now of deconstruction. There's an actual philosophical thing that people can learn at university, and a school of thought. It's called deconstructionism, deconstructionism, and in a sense, the deconstructionism philosophy is related to the rulers of this world's philosophy or mandate or plan, in order to wind down this world, in order to inaugurate a new world, which might be the one related to the scriptures before the coming of Yeshua, is the idea of, everything subtly, although it's not portrayed like that in the media and government when we hear people talk or Cameron go on or the politicians go on about it. They always talk about rebuilding, or we're going to get the economy back. But really in the background they seem to be acting in the opposite direction. Obama, for example, spent more money than all the presidents combined. And that's got the country into more debt, and the children's children will be paying for it in years to come in America, because basically the American government borrows their money from the Federal Reserve, and they expect interest back on every dollar. So that's a disastrous ploy. Okay, he's created all these things and all these armies and funded all these so-called Islamic rebels, who at the same time can be this ISIS, who've got like millions and millions of dollars of equipment and military stuff. And our UK government has done the same, and with the EU has done the same. So they're acting very strangely to me, and they don't admit it. They still go on about the same thing about rebuilding and the economy, and we have to have austerity, and we have to, we've got to pay the price now for we've got to cut people, all the job people who haven't got a job, they've got to pay the price for not having a job, and the Queen sits in her golden throne and says about her government making these decisions, so that people don't have too much housing benefit, or she sits in her golden throne and she doesn't even pay for her own roof when it gets fixed, doesn't pay tax or whatever. Maybe she does pay a bit of tax, because Tony Blair had to make her pay tax apparently. So I've just sort of jumped ahead now into sort of like the modern times, the idea of deconstructionism, the powers that be, the people that rule, even the royals, I'm talking about the bankers and other people above them, they've got this idea where of starting this new world order, which has been, like David Icke talks about, it's been covertly created. It's been done in the background while they use these masks of the systems that which we're used to, like voting and doing all these things and watching the box, watching the government go on about whoever and how it's all good, and Cameron's standing there with his suit, with his power to tell everybody and stand morally, and they've got these politicians. They're all the same, aren't they? It's ability to get, they never answer a question properly, to get what they want to say, and then they've got things prepared what they can say, and they use double speak, and they use words which mean actually something else. We know that anybody who's awake, what reads the news and cares or whatever, seems to be aware of these things, yet we're continually, and I remember when I was like this, we'll keep watching and learning and reading the paper and who we're going to vote for or not, we're not going to vote, until I sort of found out, again, through the so-called conspiracy theorists, more and more that the whole idea of two sides to everything. They always present two sides to us in the news, no matter what it is. There's always two sides. It's always complicated. There's devil in the detail. There's always, and the media, for years we thought they're telling us the truth, when really they're not. Many of the things are not the truth. And the idea, there's another philosophy from a German philosopher, I can't remember his name, but I will look it up. And he had this thing called invented this thing called the Hegelian dialect. And it's the idea of the philosophy of creating and promoting the idea of two sides to the masses. And then behind the two sides actually is the real group, the one group that controls both sides. And so a lot of all the things that then justify war are built on the media campaigns and the multi-billion dollar charade of politicians, particularly in America, of both sides. They're actually bought, well, they're supported by gifts from billionaires, like, for example, George Soros, who is on record for destabilising and creating havoc in other nations, because basically what he does, he supports and actually creates political groups to destabilise a country. And he's actually been thrown out of Russia, and a lot of the truth is coming out about him. And apparently, if anybody knows about all these type of guys, these are the Illuminati people who kind of run parallel or a bit below to the parallel of maybe the royals in the Illuminati structure, but who maybe a bit below of the Rothschilds. Rockefeller, I think, has died, and he was doing this sort of job for years. And also Rupert Murdoch was doing a job a bit like George Soros, until he passed away. But apparently George Soros has been doing this for a long time throughout the world, building, and especially trying to do it through America, where he creates groups, social political groups, funds them, and then they are then used to influence the masses. And that's the same with the media, the Post, there's Huffington Post he owns, and various NBC, CBN, CBS, or whatever. So various news, he owns a big part of the news corporate media in America, like as do the Rothschilds, who own the banks, and the banks, they own lots and hundreds of companies that also own the media, etc., etc. So ultimately, our media is vastly controlled, and if they want to create a certain situation in the earth, they'll, as David I talks about it, the problem, reaction, solution, and based on the Hegelian dialect principle of two sides, where they take and they hype everything off, and they bring up this moral arguments, which again you hear it spoken of, in Parliament. It's like when Blair wanted to bomb Iraq, all the cobblers. You remember him being, doing stuff with them old shoes, on Question Time and other special, things with the Prime Minister, and he would go on about hogwash, about his moral duty and all this hogwash. Yeah, when the whole massive hellish hypocrisy, again, that's hidden from the masses, is the fact that the people like Saddam Hussein and the Ayatollah were all paid for, hired men, and again, why George Soros type people, another guy called Brzezinski, who's in America, is another aide to Obama, but he goes back to, the Carter time, and he was one of the guys who originally hired Saudi Arabian type extremist rebel groups, or could use the term rebel again, that then morphed into the Taliban and Al Qaeda, where Bin Laden first was seen. Some of the early footage of Bin Laden is him walking around with his early cronies of would have been Al Qaeda, and they were sponsored by people like Brzezinski, in connection with America's foreign policy. Again, the whole idea of proxies, third parties, they use masks, wear masks to us, and use other dudes, other peoples, and that's the whole idea of the false flag, where the government has actually created terrorism, or I'm not saying that terrorism didn't exist, but helped create it or use it for their own devices so that they could walk away and appear separate. And also at the same time, the bankers war is a great way for them to make money. And we see more and more as through the truth movement and the internet, this information is coming out into the public eye about how, even going right back to First World War, and it's probably gone back even further than that, and how the Rothschilds manipulated and managed to control two opposing groups, even to when Napoleon and Waterloo, and how is it one of the Rothschilds, I think it was Nathan Rothschild's, early Rothschilds, made so much money, and that was one of the early periods of absolute success through them betting on who was going to win or something similar to that, because they had people controlling or in the driving seat behind in both camps. That's that strategy which is still being used, but now it's all starting to unravel, particularly through the recent things that have gone on in Syria and the Assad regime, where according to General Allen, American general, another general who was actually resigned in 2012, and he blew the whistle kind of indirectly, and he had a memo, even it was written on, saying that he was told about the plans to invade Iraq and another 7 countries before 9/11, and that he was told about it, and there's a video of him talking about that, because the Zionist plan through the Zionist nations, apparently that whole area, they plan to, they want to get rid of the Muslims. I think they want to clear the area so they can have the oil. They could probably, there's lots of water, I think, underneath, these deserts that again it's been hidden. I know that in Jordan there's a lot of water been hidden from the Jordanians, but as I say, the proxy idea, the idea of the mask, well, they wear a mask to us, create a separate field of, where they're there in suits talking to us, and they create the idea of, democracy. We ought to create democracy, or they not create the idea, or they want to propel that idea about creating democracy and defending human rights, when a lot of these people, they don't give a damn. Our so-called politicians, they don't give a damn about human rights, because if they did, they wouldn't be working hand in hand. Our royals wouldn't be having lots of slap-up hidden parties or meetings and meals and with the Saudi kings, who rule with an absolute rod of iron. It's an absolute fascist kingdom, and they're beheading as many people as ISIS are doing, and the rebel groups are doing, radical extremists are doing, and we're, dosy down partying with them. The royals are, Prince Charles is, and our an American presidents, the Bushes, have traditionally had a great connection with the royal house of Saudi, to do with both business and politics, and I think that's where some of the basis for the plots that created the situation where we're in now, which have led to the surveillance society, has been based around the idea of these ruling families. So it's not just in the West with the royals, but there's also the royals of the East, because actually if you look back, they go back to Solomon, because Solomon himself, who ended up, he was blessed by God, but again he fell into the desire of maybe more wealth, and God wanted to be God-like, I don't know, and he fell into such influence of the fallen angelic realm that he wanted to, he helped create the Baal sacrificial system of the temple, which was perverted, that talks about 2 kings, 1 king, 2 kings, and in Chronicles, that led to God, pouring down his wrath on the Israelites through the Assyrian Empire, coming and destroying and taking them into captivity, which is the roots of a lot of the supposed Solomonic Knights Templar ideologies, mythologies and belief systems, is based on all about that Templars, which is the root of the Solomonic Templar, the knowledge of the Atlantis apparently is supposed to have been hidden in the pillars, the two pillars of brass, one called Boaz, one called Joachim. So there's some mystical adherents of the two kings, because most of the kings of Judah and Israel, they weren't nice people. They did evil in the sight of the Lord, it says. Only a handful of them were worthy. And God allowed a remnant of people that had not bowed their knee to Baal. So we're all going back to how links right back to Baal worship. Somehow systems, like I said about systems, false systems based on matriarchal. In life we always have to prove ourselves. People are always bullying other people about not being good enough, or you're not worthy enough because you don't look a certain way, or you're not achieved enough, and all these sort of things, and therefore you're not worthy enough to know or being called human, and all these sort of things. We're living in a matriarchal society, which is about measurement, achievement in the physical realm, in the educational realm, and those other things. In themselves, the ideas of achievement aren't wrong. But you see things, structures, strongholds become, it's like anything. If you don't move stuff around and clean stuff out, things become places that become structures that aren't. It's like that aren't moved about and where you got to clean, and you got to clean the kitchen, you got to clean things out and sweep things through and have a change around, because things sort of stagnate, and that's where the idea of the stronghold or the negative force seems to build itself around a person's life or around a structure. It's like the idea of water. If you don't let oxygen into a tank or a pool of water, it can become stagnant. You got to let the power of life, oxygen, power of life into water, into a pool of water. Otherwise it just stagnates. It stinks. And that's maybe the parallel there of the negative forces. What something starts off as being a worthy thing can end up in the area of darkness. Like Solomon started off well with he was gifted with the wisdom, and he had a heart supposedly to ask God not for riches but for wisdom, and God chose to bless him by making him rich. He was the richest man supposed to ever live. And his wisdom, all the kings and queens and all over the place came to visit him to hear his wisdom. And God blessed that era after David for a short period after, with Solomon reigning. Queen, he met his queen and all that. But then Solomon at the same time, he had lots of wives. He was a sex maniac to the point of extremity. And he had concubines and more wives, and that's where a lot of the problems began. And God said, don't intermarry with all these nations, and they were queens and of their own nations, because they had all these strange practices. And God said that you will make them, it will lead them astray from him to worshipping their gods. Again, fallen, strange, weird, horrible deities, had some strange medical power. And he like Saul, the previous King Saul, who was the first king, ended up in the bosom, or seeking a medium, a spiritualist, and that's where he ended up, and he lost everything, Saul. And so like that, what something starts off nobly in the spirit can end up in the flesh, and worse, into the deep beast-like degradation. So that's where I believe we are at now. We might have fancy cars, nice immaculate houses, but we are, as a Britain and the rest of the world, and you can maybe understand why some Muslims will really hold on to their abstinence ethos, because they see the corruptive, subtle seductions of the West. And I don't agree with the extremities of their religion, but they may have an innocence, they may have a community thing. I don't know. I don't know about that. But I think they want to preserve something, and they know that the free for all, we do what you want, blah blah attitude. We can have freedom of choice, and then again we can have nobility, and then before our flesh starts to creep us into their realm, we end up making mistakes. We end up doing things that we don't want to do, wish we hadn't have done. And if we don't try and restrain and bring us, thankfully we, through the Lord, through God, through Yeshua, we can talk. If you're in a relationship with him, he does protect you, even though when you're in your weak moments, and he will bring you back, or you'll just keep talking to him, and he'll forgive you and bring you back to that state of peace, forgiveness. And thank you that is available, and always will be available to those who already know him. And it is available, but the time is limited. It is available to everybody else on the planet, but it's a limited period only. And so anyway, just saying a bit about general stuff about systems, and the idea that all these different spiritualities, man-made religions, or based on even the pagan universal mathematical ideas, even the basic ones to do with, like I mentioned earlier, circle and the square, and then the cross, and then I say the star. Again, it starts off circle, that seems okay. The square, I relate to that. It's a square. You build something with that, draw something, a square, and then you're into the star, and then you're into the cross, and that's like a double. It's like a double-sided something. The star, it's like another myth. It's like a sort of mystery symbol, but it relates to the angelic hosts, because they were called the stars. The stars were the heavenly bodies, according to Enoch and other parts of the Bible. The angels had positions in the heavenlies. They were the authorities, and they were supposed to be the watchers, to watch over man for good, not for ill, not to take advantage, not to, And so the idea of stardom, be a star. We've got that big star everywhere, star. And you don't really notice it, but then, sort of notice it. Oh, it's like a bit odd, a bit of an odd shape. But star is another name for something beyond man. And people want to be a star, don't they? They want to shine and become like a star, be famous, be like a star in this world, to raise you, try and have your dream and go up there, and but there's a price to be paid, because the rulers of this world won't let you. If you go against the grain, if you're good, choose to be good, or if you choose to have to follow Yeshua, it can be a hell of a ride. I know that. But at the same time, I believe that the journey is worth it. So there are. So there's another bit there, clarified and went into a few of the details and touched on a few of the subjects, and it's a bit deep. Thank you.